1. I was an 18-year-old guy when this happened, living in a pretty low crime area in California. I would meet with one of my best friends named Matt almost every night to go driving in his car, while he made weed deliveries all over town throughout the night. I would usually sit in the back seat while his wife drove us around, and he sat in the front passenger seat to weigh and divide bags of weed for sale, because he got calls for deliveries constantly. We would just drive to meet someone, usually someone he knows through a friend or something, deliver the weed, then smoke a bit on our way to another delivery. Rinse and repeat. The calls never stopped, so neither did the driving around. And it was such a constant operation that paying attention to each individual person calling became less of a priority. So if someone we didn't know wanted a bag, it wasn't a big deal. This night our friend Ryan rode in the back seat with me. This was a 4-seater car, but it only had 2 doors, so the people in the front seats had to let you in and out, so keep that in mind. Ryan was a pretty lame and quiet dude, but we weren't exactly popular guys, or stand-up citizens ourselves, so he was welcome to hang out with us. We eventually get a call for a rather large bag of wheat to be delivered, and those are always calls you have to be cautious about. But it does still happen frequent enough for it to be realistic, so off we go to deliver this bag. On the way there, I ask him if he knows the guy we are delivering to, and Matt tells me that the guy on the phone said he got his number from a friend. I warn Matt to be careful about what he is doing, but he decides to continue on anyway. It's about 11 at night when we arrive at a pretty isolated park that's located near the outskirts of town, and pull over to park the car on the curb. Then a lanky guy walks up to our car from out of the darkness, wearing a hood over his hat so we can barely see the bottom half of his face, and sagging his pants like the typical thug-type characters from around here do. But we still keep high hopes for this just being an ordinary exchange. When he gets to the passenger side window, Matt rolls it down, and the guy asks to see a bag of weed. Matt barely holds the bag up a couple inches from his lap, not being stupid enough as to hand it straight over when it's worth about $100 as it is. The guy asks to see it closer, and Matt just kind of shakes it where it is and says, "You can see it like this." The guy then reaches into the car and quickly snatches at the bag with one hand, trying to forcefully rip it from Matt's grip, while Matt holds on tightly. Then with the other hand, the guy lifts up a decently large silver pistol and points it directly in Matt's face, demanding that he let go. This part we actually laugh pretty hard about when we retell the story from time to time, because as soon as the guy pulled out the gun for all of us to see, our friend Ryan, who is in the back seat with me, slowly just starts sinking lower and lower into the shadows of the back seat, slunking down his seat towards the floorboard. And Matt always tells me that in moments like that, you can tell who is actually your true friend and who just hangs out with you to smoke free weed. So from the very second that I saw the gun from the back seat, I had been contemplating the precise moment when I could possibly grab the gun and wrestle it out of his hands. So I began inching forward slowly towards the front seat, leaning forwards to the window and jittering around impatiently, awaiting my moment to spring into action. But the guy notices my behavior and points the gun at me and tells me, "Chill, bro. Chill out and sit back." I do not do what he says and continue rocking back and forth in my seat, ready to strike at any moment. I know it's stupid to try anything, but if the perfect moment arises for me to make a move, I want to be ready to act on it, and not let the opportunity pass. This is all taking place within a couple seconds, mind you. The guy and Matt are in a short struggle over the bag of weed, and he demands Matt to let go. Matt tells him fuck off. Then the guy starts using the gun to pistol whip him in the head. That was the moment where I lunged forward over the front seat and between the window, grabbing at the guy's wrist, and wrestled him for control of the pistol. Matt is screaming at his wife, "Drive away, babe, go, go, go!" But she is in a mode of sheer panic and is hyperventilating, and can't gather the courage to turn the keys in the ignition to drive away for some reason. Matt gets smacked in the face and on the top of his head with the steel pistol a few times, and I can hear the solid thuds when it happens. I'm wrestling for the gun, then the guy rips his hand with the gun out of the car. Finally, Matt's wife gets her wits together and begins to drive away, but not before the passenger window shatters, with glass falling all over Matt and I. We managed to get away safely minus the knots on Matt's face and head. And he held onto his weed after all. Not that the weed was that important, but it's the principle that matters. Just like Matt acknowledged the principle of which one of his friends stood up for him and made a valiant effort to protect him from danger and loss of merchandise, and which friend oozed into a puddle in the cracks of the back seat of his car. We actually forgot he was even there because he stayed silent and hidden for like 10 minutes after we drove away. I had no concerns of being praised afterward for what I had done. I only did what I felt was right, and needed to be done at the moment regardless of how stupid and foolish it seems now. Matt and I are inseparable best friends now 10 years later, and have a friendship that nearly reaches a brotherly bond. I wouldn't recommend doing the same thing in that type of situation, but at the time, in the specific circumstances, I weighed the possibility of the guy shooting us over a bag of weed, and took my chances. That was one of the situations in my life that I proved my ability to work and think very well under pressure. Anyways, marijuana isn't part of my life anymore, but regardless, desperate weed fiend mugger, let's not meet again. 2. When I was in my late 20s, I lived in Boulder, Colorado. I am female, but have never been afraid of things most women are, like hitchhiking, taxi driving, and walking around at night alone. I did all of these things in my time, and on this night. I was out on a walk alone. I am introverted, and it's not that I don't like people, but I don't feel the need to be around them all the time. I'm not one of those women who need someone to go to the restroom with me. And I don't mind dining in restaurants alone or seeing a movie by myself, if no one can or will go with me. I've never understood that pack mentality, honestly. So there I was, walking around, enjoying the night air. I knew the neighborhood well. I used to be a cab driver, as I mentioned. At one point, there were 2 men following me. It wasn't unusual for people to be out. There were drunk college kids out and about often, but these guys did not seem drunk. They weren't even talking to each other. I noticed right away that they were just staring at me. They were about half a block away and looked like frat boys. When I was a cabbie, there was a rash of rapes in Boulder. One early morning newspaper delivery girl was targeted. People asked me often, "Why aren't you afraid?" For one, I carried the longest maglite I could buy across my lap when I worked. And 2, it took a lot more to scare me than things happening to other people. I knew that things could happen, but I was a pretty good judge of character. It was sort of a gift. Within a few seconds of meeting someone, I could usually tell what kind of person they are. My grandmother could do this. I believe she passed this down to me. Maybe it is just an ability to read energies or non-verbal communication, or a combination of the two, but I can tell you this for sure. These guys were up to no good. Not wanting to show them that I was scared, I kept my usual pace. I got to the end of the block and crossed the street. I walked in a sort of zigzag just to see if they would follow me, and they did. I only looked back twice after the first time, and each time they seemed excited to see that I was aware of them following me. They didn't chase me, and I didn't run. But I came up with a plan. I was close to a block that ran short. It opened up to an alley. I didn't want them to see me scared or running, so I waited until I got to that point. After I turned the corner, I ran like hell and darted up the alley, I hid in the shadows about halfway down, and I could clearly see them walk by, and they were looking for me, no mistake about it. Their heads kept turning around this way and that way as they passed. I waited a few minutes, and then left the way I came and walked home quickly, checking behind me often. They did not find me again. I would like to say I stopped my late-night walks after this, but I didn't. I do live in Brooklyn now, and I'm in my early 40s, and I have kids now, so I am much more careful. I don't go walking out after 11 if I can help it. My neighborhood is pretty safe, but I think after all of the things I've done and have been through, I definitely have some kind of guardian spirit watching over me. Now that I am older and my children need me, I don't press my luck. When I was younger, I was very much a wild spirit, and still am in some ways. But that night something terrible could have happened to me if I hadn't been sober and quick-witted. And lucky. 3. My grandparents were friends with this couple who had a daughter, the same age as my mom, but she never ended up meeting her. Let's call her Allison. Her family lived in New York in 1976, so Allison would have been 20. According to my grandma, rest in peace, she knew that Allison's parents raised her in a very strict, God-fearing household, so this created a major strain with their relationships. She was happy to leave home and excited for college in Vermont. While she was on her second semester, her roommate at the time mentioned that Allison was spiritually exploring. She was looking for something else. Suddenly, in June of 1976, Allison wasn't present for days. Like work, class, and practice. It's like she just vanished. Apparently, all of her things were still at the shared house. While her parents were about to call and declare her as a missing person, they got a postcard in the mail. It was from Allison. It had a cryptic message. It read, "I'm leaving school. I've joined this religious cult and I'm never coming back." Side note, she didn't really say religious cult. She named a particular group who I personally consider a cult. But I don't want to offend anyone. Anyway, after reading this postcard, her parents immediately hired a private investigator to kidnap her. Yes, I said kidnap, but I guess used in a helpful manner. It took the PI only 5 days to track her down, finding her at a small town in Texas. Now, I don't know if this was legal during the 70s, but as soon as the PI and backup grabbed Allison, they sent her to a medical-type center, all under the permission of her parents. It was almost like those intervention shows and how the addict has to leave that day for the program. They did what was called deprogramming a brainwashed mind. My mom had no idea what this even was. I'm just hoping it wouldn't end up being like a Clockwork Orange kind of thing. I hope most of you got that reference. It's been a month and Allison was back to herself. Her parents hugged her while her dad said it was kidnapped love. 3 years later, in 1979, my grandfather ran into Allison's father in Long Island and found out since 1976, both he and his wife have started an organization to help parents save their kids from cults. Once again, I don't know what it's called. Apparently Allison has her own family now, and is happily living in Brooklyn. 4. My parents got divorced when I was 14 years old, and it was a pretty messy divorce. My mother and I had never gotten on that well, as our personalities clashed, and we would always end up arguing. She also had a lot going on in her life, and was dealing with various mental issues at the time, mainly depression. So when we moved out of our family home, I decided I wanted to move in with my dad. I was much closer to my dad's side of the family, as, for the most part, they're pretty normal. However, on my mother's side there is a lot of messed up shit, including a cousin in prison for murder, a fair few people on drugs, and an aunt who claims to be a witch. She told me she was going to put a curse on me once, but that's a whole other story. But despite my rocky relationship with my mother, I still tried my best to make an effort with her. And over the past 8 years since the divorce, we've built up a relationship. My mother also no longer spoke to her mother, and hadn't seen her in over 20 years. I've been told by my mom and my aunt that my grandmother is not a very nice person, and was very abusive to them when they were younger. My grandmother, like my mother, also suffered with psychological problems. However, hers were slightly worse, and she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. In November 2016, my grandmother passed away. I wasn't particularly close with her, but I did occasionally go and visit. I visited my grandmother's house after her passing to collect some of my mother's belongings, including her memory box. After looking through my grandmother's house, I found my mother's memory box. It was full of photo albums and other random things. In the box, there were 3 little leather diaries. I was really intrigued to find out what my mother was like when she was younger, so I decided to have a read through a few pages. Most entries were pretty normal. She spoke about boys she liked, arguments she had with friends, etc. There were also some pretty heartbreaking entries about the time my mother's dad died. However, I came across a series of entries she had written when she was 12 that sent shivers down my spine. This is what was written in her diary. March 12th. Dear Diary, I think there is something in the house. Or maybe someone, I'm not sure. It was in my room last night, when I went to sleep. I can't see it. I can just feel it's there in the dark corner. I don't feel scared. I'm not sure what it wants, but I will try to find out. I'll write when I can. I should go. Mum's screaming again. Lou. March 13th. Dear Diary, it was there again. I didn't feel scared of it. I actually wanted to go into the dark and talk to it, but it moved. I saw it. It was so tall. It looks like a man, but he is too tall. His fingers are too long to be a human man. I couldn't see his face. It was too dark. I wanted to talk to him and ask him what he wants. But I couldn't get out of bed. I was frozen. I just stared at him. I didn't feel scared. I think he wants to talk to me. I will try and talk to him tonight. Lou. March 14th. Dear Diary, he was there again in the dark corner. He spoke to me. His voice was so deep and blurry. I am not sure what he said, but it sounded like he said, "Follow." I couldn't say anything. I feel scared now. I'm going to tell Mum. I don't want to sleep in my room tonight. I'm going to tell Heidi we should have a sleepover in her room. I can't stop thinking about what he said. His voice was so deep, it didn't sound human. Lou. March 15th, Dear Diary. Mum doesn't believe me. She said I'm lying and she will punish me if I lie again. I slept in Heidi's room last night. I tried to sleep with the light on, but Mum got angry and made us turn it off. Heidi fell asleep before me and he came to her room. He stays in the dark. The more I try to look at him, the bigger the dark area gets. He spoke again. He definitely said, "Follow, I'm so scared. I don't want him to hurt Heidi." I don't know what to do. What does he want? Why is he saying follow? I wish Dad were here. I miss him. Lou. March 16th. Dear Diary, I'm going insane. He keeps saying follow. He has started repeating it. He seems angry. He just stands there all night watching me. I don't know what any of this is for. I can't keep doing this. I tried to talk to Mum again, but she hit me and sent me to my room for lying. I don't like being in there. I know he only comes at night, but there's something about the room. I must be crazy. Lou. March 17th. Dear Diary. Heidi slept in my room last night. He came again. She saw him this time. She's so scared. I'm so scared. She slept in my bed and cried under the covers. She can feel it too. She's too scared to run to Mum. Kept saying follow again. I think he wants me to follow him. He must mean that. What else does he mean? I need to do this. I don't want him to upset Heidi anymore. I need to protect her. Mum would protect her. I'm going to go to him tonight. No matter what I see, I will go to him. I need to sort this for Heidi. I hope to write to you tomorrow. Lou. This was the last entry that spoke about whatever was in her room. The next entry mentioned nothing about it. She just talked about her day at school. I read through the rest of the diaries and there were no other entries like this. None. My mother had never mentioned anything like this to me, so the next day I decided to ask her about it. She said she doesn't remember writing it. She just brushed it off, and didn't seem like she wanted to talk about it. I didn't want to push her as she can be a bit temperamental. I know my mother suffers with psychological issues, so it's possible she made the whole thing up. But I've never known her to have hallucinations. 5. Back when I first started working in a bank as a teller, I had some familiar customers who came in a lot. Mr. and Mrs. Wong were two of those regulars who visited us at least once a week. Mr. Wong always opened the door for Mrs. Wong. They always chatted with us a bit before and after their transactions. One day the Wongs came in again, along with their daughter. The young lady opened the door for them, and Mr. Wong sat down on the couch in the lobby, instead of coming to the counter as usual. The two ladies approached the window, and I noticed Mrs. Wong looked quite depressed. She handed over a piece of paper and said I need to take my husband's name off our joint account. I then looked at the paperwork. It was the death certificate of Mr. Wong. I was confused for a split second, then immediately looked at the couch. There was no one on it. I proceeded with the paperwork, while I was still trying to figure out who or what I saw. My supervisor walked by and stopped to greet. "How are you, Mrs. Wong? How come Mr. Wong just sits there? Is he okay?" Mrs. Wong looked back slowly and turned back. "Pardon?" Ms. Wong then answered. "My dad passed away." My supervisor responded with a puzzled tone. "I'm sorry for your loss. My deepest condolences to you." Meanwhile, she tilted her head and looked at the couch again. She looked confused and shocked. To confirm her confusion, she took a look at the paperwork Mrs. Wong provided. Then she walked away. After the two ladies left, my supervisor and I had a brief chat about what we believe we both saw, but no explanation we could come up with logically. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Scary Subscriber Stories, episode 37. Thank you very much to everyone who sent their stories in for use in this week's video. If you have a story yourself, then please just click on the description in this or any video, scroll down to the bottom and you will find my email address, kingofthecities@gmail or at googlemail.com, and you can get your story to me that way. You know, that story there about Mrs. Wong kind of reminds me of the time my mother had my father's name taken off the joint bank account they shared, and the bank were very kind and helpful and killed me. You see, what they did is my father and I have very similar names. Not identical, but very similar. My father has a middle name which I don't share. And so what they did is somehow they took his name off the joint bank account he shared with my mother, and then very helpfully shut my bank account down as well. Because sure enough, I went to my bank one day, tried to take money out, and it wouldn't let me. So I went into the bank to ask what the problem was, and helpful young lady, I mean, of course she's helpful, it was their bloody mistake. She sat down and we explained what happened, and I even managed to get a look at the screen, and sure enough, they listed me as deceased. So it was a few days and they got it all sorted out and everything was working again. But still, that was the time I died. Hopefully the last time I die for a very long time to come. But, yeah, didn't feel any different than being alive, to be honest with you, being dead. Still, I wouldn't recommend it. Okay, yes, information. Okay, let's see. We're going to have a slight different change, a slight change to the schedule this week. What we're going to do is, we have episode 200 coming up, so I'm going to push that back one day, just one day. I want to give myself some extra time to work on it, because it's a bit more work than a regular 3 True Scary Stories video. Because what it's going to do is, it's going to have 2 extra long stories, and it's going to have a 6-part story. It was just a single story published in 6 parts on Let's Not Meet. So I'm going to put that together as one, and that gives us our 3 stories. And in addition to that, I'm also putting the Q&A on at the end. And you guys have been super helpful. Got plenty of questions there to put together a decent Q&A. And there's still some coming in. So I won't be recording the Q&A until... I'm probably not going to record it until Wednesday, I think. Yeah, I'll record a Q&A on Wednesday. And so if you've got questions there, just to get them in before then. You can just leave them in the comments. It's probably the easiest way to do it, actually. I just go through and screen cap them and then put them on the screen while I answer them. So yeah, that'll be up on Thursday. What we'll have on Wednesday is we're going to have paranormal stories on Wednesday, and then on Friday we'll have another paranormal video. So that'll just be a bonus paranormal video this week. And on Saturday this week, I'll try for TIFU. But if I can't get one done, I'm going to send out stories for a Glitch in the Matrix video anyway, just because I do that every week. So whichever I happen to get enough stories for, I'll do that on Saturday. So whichever one you prefer, cross your fingers for that video. Okay, I think I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.